in truth, I don't know very much about what they experienced in Ohio. Beyond the fact that Filipino communities were scarce. And so, the fact that, this guy coming from California, eventually in New Jersey, had to go to a party in Ohio to meet up with friends, I think really does say something. In New Jersey, so now we're talking about, the late 60s going into the early 70s. So I was born in 1974. My sister was born in 1972. Filipino communities were incredibly scarce, and most of the people in the area, and we're, even in New Jersey, which if you look at New Jersey now, there's so many Filipinettes and Philams all over New Jersey now, but at the time, unless you had worked in the military or unless you had some experience in the medical industry, working at a hospital, for instance, most folks really did not know about the Philippines or Filipinos. And so it was a time where if you would see a Filipino on the street, you would follow them and you'd flag them down. I was just talking with somebody, with Jose about this actually downstairs. If you saw a Filipino, you would still flag them down and you would say, "Are you Filipino?" And you'd say, "I am too." And everyone would talk about, where they were from in the Philippines, and you'd try to see if you had any connections in schools or community or anything like that. And that's very much the world in which I grew up. So much so, actually, that to this day when I see Filipinos, even there's so many more of us here, I still kind of have the reflex of doing that. Interestingly, my wife is Ethiopian, and I have the instinct of doing that when I see people who I think are Ethiopian too. I'll say, Abishanash, or trying to find out if there's that kind of shared identity. When I was growing up, and I don't know if I'm skipping too far ahead here, but when I was growing up, most of the kids did not have any idea what I was or where my parents were from. Or anything like that about my identity. I have, most folks thought we were either Black or Puerto Rican or sometimes Chinese. And kind of different stories of people pulling my identity in those different ways, One, I remember that at the time on Sesame Street, there was a character called Gordon, who was a Black man. And, I think a lot of, my Black friends, my age and generation, talk about how important Gordon was to them, seeing Gordon on television and having some shared connection with that. In some ways, that was my shared connection as well, because it was a non-white person on TV. And I think similarly, because of that, a lot of my classmates or their friends also thought, well, if she's not white, she must be Black. And I remember very well that, my neighbor, who was also my best friend, she had a younger brother who, I can't even remember the context in which it came up, but at some point in time said, "Oh yeah, she's like Gordon," meaning that I was Black, right? So that was one way my identity got pulled. Also, I had, we lived on a street right next to a playground, a park. And I do have memories of getting chased through the park with kids telling me to go back to Puerto Rico. And again, going home and being